record on this computer.
There you go.
Oh, there it goes. Yeah, yeah.
All right, here we go. So then when we're done, well, if you want, I already put it in the group. We'll go live on Facebook and you can do some Q&A with them if you want. All right, here we go.
Okay.
Hey guys, what is going on? It's Jay Campbell, the author of the Definitive TRT Manual and of course the founder of the TRT Revolution podcast. And I'm extremely excited and humbled and thrilled to have a very close personal friend of mine and really a mentor of mine on the show today, Gerald Clark. Gerald, man, thank you so much for coming on. You know, you and I have been talking for a year to do this and it's finally happened. I appreciate you being here today, brother. How are you?
Good. Hey, I think your pop filter is hitting your mic, so pull it back just a little bit. Yeah, just so it's not touching it.
Perfect.
There you go, because it was, and calm, take a deep breath, let's get centered. Yeah, we've been planning this for a while, and we've done a lot of stuff together, and there's times when it's time for us to come together and cross paths and dialogue, and I think this is one of those.
The only thing missing is that we're not in person, but this will have to do. But someday soon, man.
Yeah, I know.
Awesome. Well, anyway, real quick. So we have a bunch of things we have scripted, but me and you being the type of guys we are, probably going to go a lot of different ways. But just for the listening audience, before we get into who you are from a book standpoint and how, you know, your mission and how much you've contributed to society and the movie that we're going to be talking in depth about, tell us a little bit about Gerald Clark. How did you get to where you are today?
Whoa, wow. Not even sure where to start. I actually was telling Jay earlier that way back in 2015, when I wrote the 7th Planet Mercury Rising, I kind of got onto this thread where I started writing down my history. I don't know why, like an autobiography, if you will. And it had legs for, maybe a month or two. And I got somewhat into it, but I didn't really finish it. But I did put it up on my Gerald Clark 77 site under my bio. So it's a good question. How did I get to this place? And you know, the further along you get in this place, the more you can look back and connect the dots and see how you got there, right? Because it all kind of unfolds. If you're paying attention, if you're exercising even a modicum of reflective consciousness in this life, you generally can see when there are patterns that are repeating, or you went through something that got you from A to B, you know, that kind of thing.
Agreed.
So I think my international travel actually gave me a perspective that made me start questioning history, just to be general. And I wasn't really a historian, but having seen physical, tangible evidence of civilizations and such in other countries that I really couldn't account for, made me question history, which led me into doing some research. One thing led to another, and I toyed with the idea of writing a book my whole life. I even bought this book, Is There a Book Inside You? When I was in my 20s, going, am I supposed to write? I don't know. So the international exposure, questioning history, getting some details on the places that I was physically visiting, like Turkey or other areas. So it had to be, so I was from Missouri. I had to see it physically, be right there before it really, really affected me. And I think that one experience of unthreading that, connecting what I saw physically on travel with what I was researching. And I was thinking about writing this book on ancient technology. I was a technologist, okay? I was in a free space optics company doing patents on the terrestrial nature of a photon as it travels through and experiences Rayleigh and me scattering. Okay, that's the kind of stuff I was into. All right, kind of a whole nother world in and of itself, right?
Right.
But because of that, I was detail oriented enough that if I saw something that I personally couldn't figure out, and I felt like I was smart enough to figure out a lot of stuff, but there were some precedents in history that we lost technology that we don't understand, right?
Right.
And so that's kind of what got me started. And I've told the story many times, but how did that get to the Anunnaki? Ultimately, it started with a story, which I've never really told that closely, about who Abraham was. Because when I was in Turkey, check this out, I was at dinner with some of my clients, and they were telling me that there was local knowledge that they believe this Ibrahim, that's how they spelled it in Turkey,
Sure.
was an old archetype, an actual person that grew up in a cave in southern Turkey, and was a herdsman or sheep, had sheep or animals that produce wool. What is it, lambs? Well, so
Sure.
so he actually had exposure, and they were using this to make clothing. Well, according to the story, this was the first time that they had the right humidity level, because he lived in a cave, messing with wool, that they figured out how to make, wool thread out of this, and it started a whole industry.
Fascinating.
So supposedly affiliated with this guy, and just so happened my clients were in the textile industry, among many others. And it was my first opportunity to see a textile factory that was so big, it was like beyond what the eye could see on the horizon, of machines producing and making denim and all kinds of fabrics while I was there. So Turkey was really big on that. Anyway, I didn't, not to get too lost on that, but as an executive in engineering, connecting alternative history and talking about that stuff, when I was looking at this in 1998 to 2004 in that region, I hadn't even heard about Zecharia Sitchin until about probably the year 2002. Okay, but I had been kind of looking at this other stuff, and actually in that process of looking for ancient technology threads that I could write about, that's how I discovered a whole bunch of stuff about ancient history that I didn't know about, that people had already published. And it slowed me down, because I thought, oh, well, these people have already published all this. I got to go learn all this before I can add anything to it, right? And write a book. So that's how I discovered Eric von Däniken, Zecharia Sitchin, and many, many others. I was telling you, I'm reading this book by George Smith.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. It looks
yeah. This one, Chaldean Genesis. And actually, I wrote about George Smith in my first book, The Anunnaki and Humanity, because he was the British he wasn't a big name like Rawlinson or the other guys who was in Nineveh. I can't remember their names right now. But anyway, he was in the background. He wasn't that well known, but his name was George Smith, and he actually was an expert in all these cuneiform tablets and such, finding the dictionaries, going, well, here's what we know and why we know this, and why this city's important. All the kings there. Brilliant. 1870, that book was written.
Amazing.
So, yeah, so I mean, just fascinating. Now you can go on, and I know Rex has been looking at this lately. The digitization of these cuneiform documents now is made it up to Oxford, and that's where I started by going, who can I trust? Because poor Sitchin's getting lambasted like he's the mistranslator, when it's been in books around since 1870. Okay, and almost all the stuff that he's talking about, these guys knew about it already. Well,
Gerald, isn't it? I would have to say it's no coincidence, right, that it's starting to get digitized.
Oh yeah, yeah. So I kind of got lured into the Sumerian thing by accident. I was looking for the oldest culture where we had some writing that I could have some, I don't know, trust that it was translated correctly, so it wasn't just a bunch of gibberish. And there was so much out of Sumer. It was like, okay, take your pick. Right. Everything from wedding contracts to all about the Sumerian kings and their gods, and poetry and math and medicine and science and whatever you wanted to know about it was all there. It's fascinating. So,
all just conveniently slid to the sides of history.
Well, it's easy to hide something when you call it a myth. Oh, here's the myths of these less sophisticated people that we conquered that you don't need to know about.
It's like mythology, right? I mean, it's the very name.
That's right. That name was chosen to denigrate what they believed while you pushed what you believed. Absolutely.
Incredible.
What you believe, what the dominating culture believes is the truth, and what they believed is a myth, or some facsimile of superstition. Superstition's another great one, right? All the indigenous tribes in Africa are superstitious. Let's face it.
Right.
Even the
American Indians, right?
Even the ones from Mali who have evidence to show something otherwise, right?
Right. The Dogon. Yeah. Amazing. The Dogon. I always mispronounce that. Well, so talk a little bit about, before we get into the books, even in that, talk about a little bit about your military career. For those, I know we talked about this a million times, but just briefly mention it so people understand the credibility that you bring from that perspective.
Actually, I don't think I've ever really told that story.
Okay, well, perfect.
I was in Arkansas. I had applied to the Air Force Academy, got accepted. I chickened out going because I don't know. I think probably the manuals they sent me with people complete shaved heads and all in uniform was way beyond what I had. That made it real for me. I was like, no, I'm gonna go to college. That's okay. I wanted to fly, Jay.
Right.
I had dreams of flying because I had these crazy out-of-body experiences over and over and over once I was growing up, writing journals, trying to figure this out. And I felt compelled. I wanted to fly. And it was deep for me, okay? It wasn't just a little yearning. This was something I was going to do, one way or the other. And of course, as a poor country boy, seeing the price of going to flight school and such as a civilian, you're talking big money.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't have
that was then big money, too.
I didn't have that kind of money. And to go to military flight school, I knew it cost somewhere at the time that I went in 1989, somewhere on the order of $220,000 per candidate to train them, something like that, at least for the main stage. So I left Arkansas with this plan in my head. I was going to go back. I was 17 and I had a car. I had a job, so I saved up and had a car. Drove it across country. Placated my mom by living with my aunt for a short time while I got my own apartment in Ocean Beach.
That's awesome.
Finished my last year of high school, and I knew I needed residency there a year before I could go back to where I wanted to go to school, and that was at UCSD. I don't know why. I was born in San Diego, and I wanted to go back there. I wanted to go to school there.
Right.
I can't really explain that part, but I actually took the action and set up residency.
There are no coincidences, as we both know.
Yeah. So I applied to UCSD right out of Point Loma High School. Actually, my last year in high school was my worst performance, disrupting my life like that as a 17-year-old, moving across country, living on my own. My grades suffered, but I still did well enough to get in. I got into Revelle College in electrical engineering, and I was in processing, actually, when the strangest thing happened. Excuse me, I'll get some coffee.
No worries.
I wasn't going to name his name, but I will, because he's dead now. A gentleman recruited me to work over at the Point Loma Shopping Center while I was in high school to help with some general maintenance and stuff. He must have seen that I was a wayward 17-year-old living away from home, trying to go to high school to get myself into college.
Sure.
Kind of took me under his wing just a little bit, gave me a job doing maintenance over at the shopping center that he owned right down the street from where the high school was. Okay, it was right on the middle of Rosecrans and Sports Arena, that area, big shopping center.
Sure.
And interesting guy. He wasn't egotistical, but he liked esoteric things. And one of the things he had was a P-51 Mustang that he was putting together and restoring in his hangar out at Montgomery Field, which was pretty close to where we were. And one day he decided to, I don't know, influence me, I guess. And he put me in his 450 SL Mercedes, asked me if I wanted to drive it, took me out to the airfield and showed me his P-51 Mustang.
Awesome.
Got me so excited. He must have known I wanted to fly somehow, some way. I don't know how he knew this, but he goes, something about, you should fly helicopters. They can do things this thing can't even do. And that stuck in my head. It was like, I don't know where, it was crazy. Within a week, I looked up how to go take the flight aptitude test so I could fly a helicopter. And I went downtown and took that test. All the meanwhile, I was applying and getting it. And I was at UCSD, okay, in processing, okay, getting my room and all that, where I was going to live and what course to study and all the whole process. Well, I was in that process when I got this call. Said, hey, we got a flight slot for you. What are you going to do?
Wow.
I was like, whoa.
I know what I'm going to do.
I felt like an alien, to be honest with you, having just left the country, the primitive woods of Arkansas.
Right.
Being on the campus of UCSD, I was very intimidated. And my heart wanted to fly. I didn't care how I got there. And when that came up, my blinders went on. I was like, oh my God, I just went through this whole process, got accepted into college. I'm going to throw that away to go to live my dream. And that's what I did.
So literally, though, you got the call because you scored so well on the aptitude test, correct?
Right. Well, I didn't realize, that was all the carrot, the stick, right? So
yeah, of course.
Well, to make a long story short, I went in the military expecting I was going right to flight school. Didn't happen. I left Fort Rucker where I was getting my training. That's where the flight school was in Alabama. They deployed me from there over to Korea for a year because of some waiting game they wanted me to play or whatever they were up to. I got so upset when I was in Korea, I applied to go to become a naval test pilot or a naval pilot. I was like, you're not going to let me in? I'm going over there. That's how serious I was. And I actually applied, got accepted, and created a huge problem for my commander while I was in Chuncheon, Korea, because I was damn serious. And I was very upset that they redirected me for a year from my goal and lied to me. So I already had it in my crawl right then. I was like, okay, I'm about to fly him, but I'm not about you.
Right.
You lie to a country boy, they don't take it very well.
No.
So I left Korea, went back, finally got into flight school after waiting another 6 months. They tried to redeploy me to Fort Polk, Louisiana, and I still had to fight. I finally got to Fort Rucker, thinking I was going to go right to school, and they made me a training cadre officer for the officer basic course for 6 months while I waited. So every 2 weeks I was running through, as if I was a candidate, having to run them through it. Listen, that's like chewed up dog meat by the time you actually get to the goal, okay?
Playing the game, yep.
I played the game. I got through flight school, got the aircraft I wanted. I wanted to fly Cobras. That's what I got.
It's awesome.
And I flew OH-58 Kiowa Aero Scouts for a while. So I got transitioned to be an Aero Scout pilot while I was at Fort Rucker. And then I went off to Fort Riley, Kansas for 4 years, got deployed to Germany for reforges. National Training Center 5 times, living in a tent in the desert, playing war games. You know, hardly ever at home. So I did that for a total of 7 years, 1,500 flight hours. In 1989, I got out. I went right back to UCSD. Thought I could go right back there. I had to take a circuitous route through community college while I got back into UCSD, but I picked up right where I left off and completed the electrical engineering degree and a computer engineering degree in an undergrad and a master's program. So I went back and finished what I started.
How old were you at this point?
I was 27 when I got out of the military in 1989. So I was a non-traditional student to go back to college at that age. Right. But I was a very serious student by that point.
And how old were you when you had both of your degrees when you got out?
I got my bachelor's degree in computer engineering, a 5-year program in '94. That's after spending a year or two at Mesa College to complete all the transfer applicant guarantee requirements to get back into UCSD. If you didn't have any college, you'd let right in. So as you had some, you had to complete your associate's degree to get up there. So
you were like 31 or 32 then, right when you got your.
I was 94. I was probably 63. I can't do the math on the air. It was in '94. Okay, I did my undergrad in '94. By '98. I completed my master's degree en route to getting my PhD. I was really there to get a PhD in electrical engineering. They had an en route program at UCSD. They didn't even have a master's program to let you meet all the requirements and get it. But I was in electronic circuits and systems, and I was really focused kind of where hardware and software meet in that space for evolvable computing. Right. That was my focus.
Right, and that's pretty much what led you into the international travel. That obviously then, increase your curiosity with, the ancestry of man and just the ancient historical texts.
Well, to some degree, actually, that started the first artificial intelligence company I worked at for 7 years while I was going to school. Okay, so I was working 30 hours as a system engineer during the week at a company that my cousins and I started. They bootstrapped it by doing small business innovative research programs, mostly working with government agencies, which made sense because here I was just leaving the military, right? So it was kind of a fit. So they were doing research in artificial intelligence, mostly for, I would say, starting with data mining and then modeling. Okay, so I was mixed up with that with DARPA for several years. Okay,
interesting.
So I did expert system rule sets for a rotorcraft pilot who was flying through hostile scenarios so that a UAV drone could mimic what I did and stay alive. Okay, that kind of crap.
Fascinating.
Okay, so I did that for 7 years. And actually, some of the algorithms I ran into in that space, modeling evolution and human populations, caught my attention because I was interested in evolution. It was one of my hobbies. I was watching the San Diego Museum, everything that was going on, especially with Lucy and all this. It was kind of a hobby of mine. I was like, I wanted to know the truth.
Sure.
I was a truther way back then. And so when I got into genetic algorithms and learned about how those could be used to model perpetuating traits in a species, if you have a mutation, if you're going to model it that way, or just what. So I got really good with genetic algorithms, and I was using one in my graduate work in hardware to show how you could rewire something to adapt to a set of inputs dynamically. Okay,
right.
like
us.
Yeah, imagine that. Well, this brought up some really deep stuff that I found out about evolution. Number one, at the time and the processing speeds that we had, real-time application of electronics and evolving using stochastic processes and the algorithms we were looking at, not possible in real time, depending on what real time is for you. If you were talking microseconds to respond to an impact, no. Right. But possibly slow algorithms for a rover like on Mars, sensing the irradiation, where's the sun, got to point my panels, all that kind of stuff, like training a bug. That kind of stuff you could do back when I was working with us in '89. Okay, and it's only gotten better. So
fascinating.
So what I walked away also with that was that species don't change characteristics just based on a mutation in their combination of their genetic material and producing progeny. It could happen based on an environmental stressor, which might be a temperature change, light levels, whatever. I mean, like they've studied with chickens, these chicken eggs, where you can put certain chemicals to represent a stressor that would have happened and it seems to be happening as soon as it goes from the zygotic state, starts multiplying, when these features can come out.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that they can't come out for a mature adult either. Look at a pig that goes feral. They can grow tusks and get all their hair changes and all that, right?
Right.
So the environment so that lesson taught me that it's perhaps not correct to think that evolution only happens during mutations. It can happen during environmental stressors, so that the species, because that would explain to me how species that were temperature sensitive could all of a sudden survive, other than just using hibernation. So anyway, so that was something I walked away with from my delving into evolution, and it also made me think that, maybe humans are sensitive to their environment too, possibly from an energetic standpoint that nobody was talking about, that might change our state, and maybe it's just our awareness state, right? So this led me into at least having an electrical principle, a basis for understanding electricity and how it could be interacting with matter, which I'd never really thought about until I got into structural integration.
Right.
So I probably should tell that story to connect it all together. So in 1999, my son JJ was born. He had a genetic disorder. He was severely mentally retarded, had over 200 symptoms from DiGeorge syndrome, a medical malady. But little did I know he was a gift from the creator of all to spawn my path to do what needed to be done. So looking at him, I realized that there was something strange with his structure, and that his connective tissue had drooped down on his feet. Imagine this is his foot. And all the tissue had bunched up on the top of his foot and around his ankles. It's like the connective tissue was so loose that it would droop on his body.
Right.
And at the same time, he would sit in kind of almost yogi kind of positions. He was had this flexibility at the joints that wasn't normal. Okay.
Right.
At least I didn't think it was. And there were lots of other issues with his structure not being symmetrical. He had heart surgery, so his sternum was a little askew, and it caused asymmetries in his neck. So I'm looking at all this going, how can I help my kid? And he's in braces to support his legs because he didn't have the muscle tonus to stand up even when he was 5.
Right.
Okay. And I'm watching all these things that he's been exposed to, and I don't want to go down that path tonight.
Right. I understand.
Because smoke will be coming out of my ears, and I'll be seeing red. Okay.
Sure. But
one thing led to another, and I came across this work while I was running a startup company called LightPoint. I had been in several startups after Reticular Systems, the AI company. I did Loral telemetry and instrumentation, worked with Global Star as a modem designer. Okay, I worked in television, doing MPEG codecs for ABC
Right.
and NBC, CBS, all of that. And then the last gig I ended up was at LightPoint doing free space optics. So that's the one I got a lot of travel in. But through that process, that last process, because of my kid and a little bit of a downturn in the telecom market, I left LightPoint in 2002 and had time to focus on writing, thinking, reading all the stuff that I wanted to read. And that's when I really started my book effort seriously. And by 2004, I had started the Anunnaki and Humanity, that book, based on my research of everything I read and correlated. And I've been looking at it for a very long time. So, but it kind of got put on hold with issues with my kid. In 2003, I decided I was going to do something about his structure. I had read Ida Rolf's book, accidentally being turned on to it by a fellow athlete while I was running triathlons in San Diego. And I tried it out myself first because I had so much pain. I thought if it works for me, it's got to help my kid.
Sure.
And one thing led to another. I went to the Anatomy and Physiology School in Boulder, Colorado, learned how to do that, went straight over and learned from the very best of the best, Emmett Hutchins. Bless his soul, he's passed on this last year that I just found out about. Worked in that space for over 40 years, putting his hands on and healing people.
Amazing.
He was mystical. So I picked his brain, learned everything he knew, and came back and applied this to my kids before people from the medical industry never even took note that all of a sudden his braces are off. He's jumping on a trampoline, more balance than any kid in his class. And I'm potentially the bad guy that might be putting a bruise on his leg or something, causing him, some reason that they need to call child protective services. I mean, this is the kind of shit that's going on. Okay,
Right.
Excuse my language. Okay?
No, it's okay. Understood.
But behind the scenes, Dad was doing what had to be done for his kid. Okay.
Right. Always.
And with all kinds of opposition from even the mother, which is really hard to explain. Okay.
Right.
Anyway, one thing led to another. I never planned on being in business as a structural integrator. But as soon as you start putting your hands on bodies and changing them, your phone starts ringing. And the master's going to ask you, are you with us or what? Are you going to join us? He actually put me in a position like that one day when I was in Hawaii during the second phase right before I graduated. And I was close with him. He was a brilliant man, and he shared a lot of his research with me. And one day he sat me down, knowing I was an engineer, I was a scientist, and I was just there to help my kid. He pinned me down. He goes, are you going to go? Essentially, you're going to go back to that life, or are you going to be the change you want to see and join?
Remain a healer. Right.
And I couldn't say no to him. And so I started my kid. Next thing I know, I was in business for myself. I saw thousands of people in structural integration over almost a 10-year period. But while I was doing that, it was very hard to make a living, let me tell you. While I was being squeezed for funds to earn at the level that I was when I was a vice president of engineering, which wasn't possible as a structural integration body worker that can't even get insurance to take your work because you've been locked out of the industry. Okay, that's how it worked.
Right.
So if you could make $40,000 a year as a structural integrator, you're doing really well. I mean,
right, and that's hustling like crazy too.
You're talking 7 or 8 hours of physical work per day, pushing, using tension and
Believe
gravity.
me, I know.
This is not fluff work. And listen, it makes you very, very strong. But at the same time, after a couple of weeks of that, you felt like you felt like you ran a marathon. You can't even push against something without it pushing back so hard. You got to lay down. Okay.
Right.
So
but it did give you a great appreciation.
Yeah. It's not for the faint of heart. Okay, I'm just telling you right now. The body worker needs a lot of work to get themselves recovered to do what they do.
Believe me, I know. My ART technician, she took off 3 years. She literally just stopped working for 3 years to just heal and recover.
Yeah. Well, I used to do consulting as an electrical engineer in San Diego, and I would drive over to Tucson where I had 50 plus clients, and you had to go where the money was in the industry. Okay, if somebody's willing to pay you hourly for what you do versus a one-time fee for what you're getting in San Diego, then you go where the hourly is because you gotta have that money and actually have a facility and pay for it. My rent was over $5,000 a month.
Yep.
To have a facility to see clients, but I finally had to set that up. And it was a devastating level of overhead to have to support while you're doing that. Anyway, I was driving over 350 miles every month for 2 weeks, or at least a week, spending every waking moment seeing clients to make the money so I could go back to San Diego and still be there to deal with my kids and the situation I was in. It was like burning it at both ends continuously. So
I understand.
Enough of that. Fantastic things I discovered from that work. I set up an imaging lab. As an engineer, I had purchased a resonant field imaging system and a polycontrast interference photography license key, working with some experts, and one of them was a guy out of Pennsylvania who was running a innovative technology and energy medicine site that I was really impressed with. And he was a double E, electrical engineer, knew his stuff. So I bought the stuff, was like, I'm working on these people. I ran through my structural integration practice, and next thing you know, they got light coming to their outer eyes, they're feeling gravity through the top of their head, and their personality's changing, and they're waking up to their spiritual path. Awesome, okay? And I knew this for many, many years. I knew the power of this work if you connect somebody to gravity and what it does to your equation 5A, okay? So I got the cameras and the imaging system to try to bring this to the next level so that people could see what was happening to them, okay? And it was like, wow, I was not successful with that. I mean, it was great for me personally, looking at it, correlating their structure with their energy. Obvious, right? It's obvious.
Sure.
The meat modem's an antenna. If your antenna's broken, you don't get the right colors coming out. Okay?
We both know that.
Really easy, real simple stuff without getting too technical. But that was important for me on my path to verify that the human energy body was real. What does it look like, and what amplifies it, and what negates it? That's all I wanted to know. And structural integration turned it on in a big way. And so did vegan diet. And other things, cutting out alcohol, you could see it, okay? It's like, okay, well, I got a real life example of what you could look like if you tried to treat this meat host like it matters.
Right. Well, as you and I have discussed on many podcasts before, 95% of society is blocked. I mean, their host, their meat modem is being, they're not connected from GMO foods, from alcohol, from sugar, from lack of exercise, from the conditioning and the hypnotic signals that are being bombarded at, like you said, microwave frequencies. I mean, we could go on and on and on, but we know that. So you definitely need that. Any person needs some form of body work, whether it's active release technique, whether it's
Let me. I'm sorry.
We're having a massive, Gerald, I'm not kidding you. We are having a massive thunder and lightning storm here, which I have never heard in California. Yeah, I got to look out the window.
Oh, I didn't mean to step on you because we had a little delay in the thing. But what I wanted to say for listeners that are listening.
It's literally black outside. I hope I don't have a tornado. Oh my God.
But I want to tell people the secret of this work without getting all technical.
Yes, do it.
Because I spent enough time trying to teach people about this, and they get all lost in the process, okay? But you got to back up and understand the basic assumptions that structural integrators make about the body. Number one, it's plastic. And it's malleable and it can change. Yes. And if you know how to do that, that's the bomb, okay? Yeah, you can watch people go through yoga and contortion training. It takes them 20 years to change the state of their body. Well, structural integration can do it in 5 minutes if you know what you're doing, okay? Yep. And it has to be done in an intelligent way because your body is put together in layers of this connective tissue, which is collagen, which is protein strands, okay? Well, if you know how to change this stuff, you can actually change the alignment of the body with the gravity field, and there are lines and planes in the body that structural integrators are trained to know about, okay? And they're very simple. If you know what they are and you're aligned to them, guess what? Your energy will be different than somebody that's not.
Right.
That's a fact. And athletes discovered this.
Yep.
Actually, the athletes in the 60s found out about structural integration. They used to call it Rolfing, which Ida Rolf didn't really like that name. But they discovered it and they kept it secret to themselves because if you could get your body to operate without impediments and all the lines and planes were optimal, you were a superior athlete. And they didn't want everybody to know that.
There's no doubt. I mean, it's a competitive advantage.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, one of the things Ida Rolf used to say is, if a random body is like a Ford, whereas somebody who's had structured work, and she didn't know her cars that well. She called it a 12-cylinder Jaguar, Okay, she was trying to compare, a standard model with a sports car. Okay, they're not even comparable. Well, that's what happens to the human body when the layers of adhesions that have been caused through simple birth process and pain. Every time an impact happens where a bone crosses the surface, guess what?
Yep.
It's stuck everywhere on your body.
No doubt about it.
So actually, this process of getting the superficial fascia and the deep fascia free led to these energy issues. I don't want to get lost in the work, but the basic assumption is if you align the structure in the gravity field like a plumb bob, and I've done this many times.
Right.
And we used to take pictures of before and after so you could see what changed, okay? And you can't force this by sitting up straight and posturing. That doesn't work, okay? It doesn't work. But it is part of playing the gravity awareness game. Whereas if you pretend your head is a bowling ball on top of your torso, you got to balance it there, so it's not falling forward, causing all your lats and your traps to get tight.
Yep.
It's a game worth playing. It's like walking Tai Chi, right? Where you're paying attention where you are in gravity, even when you're in the kitchen making dinner or doing whatever. It's a game you play 24/7. It's not.
No doubt about it.
So if you're willing to play that game, your body will get better. It's like it tunes in. It knows where the top of your head is, and this is intrinsic in every human. This is the other thing I want to say. There's an intelligence in every human, even special needs children.
Absolutely, the purest. They're the purest.
Well, this is what I found out with my son. I was so worried that because he had no awareness of how to sit in the gravity field or pay attention or play the gravity game, that this would not help him at all. It would make it worse. Well, I was wrong. And that's what encouraged me to start the J.J. Clark Foundation, a nonprofit organization that I set up, which his mother didn't support at all. And if you don't have support the people that have control of the child, it's not going to go. Mm-hmm. Okay. But I tried funding that to bring structural integration work to those children because it has a profound effect on them.
Well, we know that's not going to work, Gerald, because the people that are in control of those children don't want them to be.
That's right. That's right. Well, we don't want to go down that path right now because that's a whole nother show.
No.
Okay, I'm telling you. Yeah. But anyway, I probably talked about stuff I normally don't talk about.
No, it's good. I'm glad.
Some personal, but my special needs son, JJ, launched me into being a structural integrator, taught me about the human energy body, made it tangible. I served my community of thousands of people for over 10 years and brought many people to a relationship with gravity they never knew was possible.
Right.
So that was my impact on that community. And I talked about it in many shows and have sent many people to the Guild for Structural Integration, which is where I learned this technique.
And I'm as you know, I'm a huge believer in structural integration. I've had many people involved in biomechanics with the human back and the spine, and there's no question. I mean, we don't have to stay there more. Well, it's interesting because that transitioned you or allowed you to become the famous author, which we haven't even spoken about right now. So obviously, you've written 2 books. I want you to give very high-level summaries of both. We don't even have to get into the Anunnaki mythos.
Right.
You can talk a little about it, whatever you want, but just give us high-level summaries because I want to spend more time talking about the movie, but just give a high-level summary to most people that don't know.
Yeah, the first book was the hardest. I had boxes of information. I had so much information. I didn't know how to bring it to the audience. And like I said, by 2004, I'd already started. And I was running my structural integration practice out of Del Mar and seeing a lot of people at that point. And one of which I somehow ended up on the path where I was ready to make this book happen. And I had no knowledge about how to take what you'd written and bring it to the market. Okay.
Right.
I was very traditional. I used to work with patent attorneys and all this kind of stuff. So for me, you needed an editor. Okay. So I went out and hired somebody who I thought was going to be an editor. That turned out to be the worst decision I'd ever made in my life. It completely shut me down. The stuff I was writing about, I should have put 2 and 2 together. The person had been a recent convert to Judaism, my goodness. And here I was writing about this stuff. And so this was intentional, okay? I got shut down. I didn't realize what game I was in. And I got targeted very early, and I didn't realize what I was up against.
Right.
Through that process, I recovered myself. And actually, it wasn't until going back into corporate America, trying to make money to support myself and get my kid out of a terrible situation that he was in, that he's still in today. And I'm not going to go there today, but it's not over, but it's almost over.
Right.
Anyway, so in that process, fighting for this kid, Krista and I were both in corporate America, living in the Golden Triangle of San Diego, right where telecom and all that happened, biotech companies. And I was working a really crappy job, just trying to be employed while I was dealing with some really heavy stuff.
Right.
And because of that, we both got fired in the same week for participating in the issues surrounding the special need child.
Right.
Unwarranted surgeries, things like this, going and getting the medical records, trying to intervene, and stirred up a hornet's nest. And one thing led to another, and the rest of my duration in San Diego was spent in court, unemployed, fighting for my child while every resource that I had was dwindling.
Right.
That's how much I cared. Okay. So that fight ended with a sheriff walking me and Krista out of the courtroom after I called the judge to the carpet and said, "You know the truth, now make your decision right now." And so I knew I was up against a very fallen system, but I was willing to do and spend every ounce of effort I had, which I did.
Right.
And, bringing that to the court record. And I was playing the lawyer myself because I didn't have money to pay a lawyer anymore. And they never met a lawyer like me.
Right.
Let me tell you. So after all that, our lives got worse being in San Diego because of what we had done and what I had done by publishing my book. My book being brought to court to show that I was crazy, talking about aliens. That one that's behind you, that bestseller up in the corner there, that one. Yeah, that one. It's funny now, isn't it? Yeah. So anyway, that book was really hard to write because of that. But in 2013, when we lost our jobs fighting for that kid, Krista did something amazing. She'd been blogging about her vegan path while she was working at a company that was doing the genetic stuff for Monsanto and all those people, okay, that were poisoning the food supply. So she was really torn over that. Well, while she was blogging, she decided to take her blog and turn it into her first book. And next thing you know, we found that she could publish it without having an editor her way. Didn't cost us a single thing except our time.
Yep.
And very shortly after that, when I saw that, I was like, you know what? That's the path for me. I don't care if anybody reads it or not, but it's going to get published like that.
Right.
Nobody in between me and probably and the problem is I really needed an editor at that point to make sure my engineering jargon and all that stuff was cleaned up. So we had some misstarts and stuff, but I followed her path, self-published, and we took the 10 prototype copies of that I had to Joshua Tree. We were actually going camping, had nothing to do with Contact the Desert. They just happened to be there, stopped by, gave them a copy, and then within 2 weeks I was on George Norrie's show talking about my book.
Yep. Awesome.
So that was crazy, but it took from 2004 to 2013 to get that book written. It was just like pulling teeth, really. But the second book, when that one came around and I was ready to answer the question, okay, so supposedly the Anunnaki were here from an alien planet and they had something to do with genetically augmenting the bipedal hominids that were on this planet that led to us being enslaved. Okay, a lot of people could buy that, but they didn't understand, and the question burning for them, especially people that were, more religiously inclined or had fundamental beliefs about truth or who the creator of all was and such. They wanted to know, well, if that's true, then how do these Anunnaki fit in with the creator of all, with their concept of who God is, right? Hey, I'm gonna stop here for just a second. I don't know if you can hear me. It says my internet connection is unstable. So hold on for just a second, okay? Your image is frozen. I'm going to turn my video off for a second and see if we can recover, okay? Are you there, Jay? Are you there, Jay? I can't hear you if you can hear me. So I turned my video off for just a second. Now I'm going to pause the recording.
We can just keep going. I didn't realize it was recording, but it's good. The other one's actually recording right now, so we'll just
okay. So everybody wanted to know, okay, if you convince me that maybe the Anunnaki or even some other race, who knows, had something to do with us showing up here on this planet, well then how do they fit into the whole thing? Right. Who is God to the Anunnaki? That's what everybody wanted to know.
Right.
Anyway, I thought it was a very valid question. And, I had the same issue myself when I was going through all the documents and reading, like, how does this all fit together? How powerful are these beings? Where do they fit into the whole structure of things? And I asked all those questions of myself. And one thing led to another. And I remembered reading multiple accounts about emissaries that the Anunnaki had mentioned in their writings that had given them messages back from their home planet. If it wasn't Anu directly, it was someone else, right? And because of that, I started paying attention to what they called this being that they venerated. And the ones that I actually had any confidence in that looked like were wise and benevolent to mankind. There weren't a lot of them. There were a few, like Ningshita, like Enki, like Ninmah, and several others. I started looking at, well, what did they think about this creator essence that is somehow they're the liaisons? Are they the liaisons between us and them? Because one of the ponderings Enki had was about the fate and the destiny for these primitive workers that he'd been asked to create by the council. Right. Do I create them? What would their fate have been had I not jump-started their genetics? Right. What would their fate be if I had given them the full DNA that we had relative to the commander that wants them to be slaves? All these issues he's pondering. I'm like, man, it puts you right into Dr. Frankenstein's seat to think about these kind of things and to have the responsibility for a seed of life that could go on for a very long time and have interactions with other species and all this. And where do you say, okay, I'm responsible for that? Or do you pass it off by saying, well, I gave them all free will, so they get to choose. Right. So all these deep questions came up about, the relationship, the Anunnaki, and then to mankind. And then it started into this whole thing about, well, what about all these other races? Are there different races? Are the Negroidal and the Caucasoid and are all these different races different genetic instantiations by the Anunnaki or other races? And it starts opening a whole can of worms to the Anunnaki Council of 12 that we saw mapping to the Greek Council. Well, if it did that, you can extrapolate to every other council of gods all over the world. You start digging in deep and you realize they were everywhere. Right. Well, this is not a surprise, though, because by the time Plato had written down the words of Solon and completing his story, he said that the gods had divided the entire planet among themselves and their offspring. Right. So they were already everywhere by then.
So that does bring a fascinating question. You might as well answer it then. So how is it that we do have the different colors? We have like you said, the Negroid, we have the Indian, the American Indian, the red. We have like the Indian from Asia, the Pakistani Indian. Mm-hmm. What do you think caused all of those different pigmentation changes?
I think it was probably different variations of genetics from either one alien race that was playing around,
or many
over a period of time where they tried this and then this and this, or it was other races that at one point in time decided they were going to have a little genetic war, introduce their seed. Because really, you have to look at this as a piece of terrain, right, that a galactic colonizer wants to say is theirs. How do they do that? Then they have their inhabitants living on it, just like China and Japan are doing. The South China Sea, right? No, our people live on that. That means it's ours, right? It's occupation. Okay, it's occupation. So it's like possession is 9/10 of the law, right? So if you're in possession of it, then it must be yours. So they play this game. It looks like.
Well, so what I was going to say to you, and we always talk about this in Southern California, like in real estate now, because the Chinese, by and large, and again, we have different cultures and everything, but they're so foreign to us as far as the way they act, the way they relate, their spatiality concept, the way they communicate. I mean, they are literally like, when I say they're like an alien, I mean, it might as well be they really are from a different planet. So it's like, sometimes you start thinking that whoever their progenitor race was completely different than, say, your and I progenitor race. Now, there's obviously tons of intermingling.
Yeah, it might not even be just the race. Look at the way that Asia has been exposed to language that cause their brains to become symbolic processors. That's different than what goes on with the phonetic alphabet that we use.
Sure.
Okay, so this is a proven fact. So why would you do that unless you knew that you wanted your race to have a more sophisticated symbolic processor?
Yeah.
So it may not just be genetic, but it's also what they expose them to the environment and their training. And their concept of individuality. Look at the West. John Wayne is the icon because he stands for solitary authority and a sovereign being who doesn't answer to anybody, right? The cowboy image. That image is very foreign to Asia, where they work in a hive mind type.
Hive mind all the way.
Arrangement that's optimized to produce an output they want as fast as they can get it.
Absolutely.
You know, and any individual that's trying to do their thing that doesn't operate that way, they're a problem for that kind of system. It's true in Japan and China too.
You're right. I mean, every Asian culture.
Mm-hmm.
You're right.
Yeah. So why are they being trained that way versus how we've been trained? So you see what I'm saying? So and I think there are genetic differences as well. And listen, if you change the belief system, the diet, and the source of food that maybe it's more pure. There's all kinds of things you can do.
You're right.
Geographically being located over there versus over here can have a huge impact. Look at the Longevity Valley in Ecuador.
Right.
There are people living well beyond 100.
Yep.
And why? Is it the altitude, the pressure, the combination of oxygen and stuff?
Right.
There's a lot of factors. Gravity.
Right.
Lack of overbearing, intrusive government that's causing you to have a cortisone release 2 or 3 times a week because of what they're doing.
It's true.
I know.
It's crazy, man.
Stress. Stress has it.
Well, let's talk a little about, because I want to talk a little, spend like the last 10 minutes promoting your movie and how important it is. But give us a brief 2 or 3 minute summary of the state of the world right now.
Okay, and then we're going to come and do the happy thing at the end with the state of the movie. Okay, the state of the world. What's the state of the world according to Gerald?
Oh, it's fucked up.
Yeah. Well, actually, it might be going just the way it's supposed to. This isn't the part I ain't not so sure about.
Yeah.
So the model to me is, if you buy into these assumptions that the Anunnaki have been here and are here, and
they're here,
and have been running things from the very beginning, from the time that they took their DNA and stuck it into a ovum of a female hominid on this planet, that they've been involved and they put their mark on us, and we belong to them as far as they're concerned. Okay, the extent to which they might be involved with this culture or that culture at a point in time is kind of hit and miss, but we know in the ancient past that they were definitely face-to-face involved with the Sumerians, looks like the Egyptians and the Greek too. And then they kind of disappear over into Rome and Europe, hiding behind secret societies and stuff. They never left, okay? So there were factions of them everywhere. Okay, that being said, those factions seem to have different agendas on this planet, and they always have. The ultimate agenda for them was to get resources and protect their own planet. But I think that extended to other resources that we had. And so now they've galactically colonized this planet and probably many others in our solar system. Not just Earth, okay? As a matter of fact, I think they're the affiliation of the ancient beings that came from Sirius A and B related to the Dogon. Those clearly have indications they were tied to the Anunnaki, both Enki and Enlil. Okay, so
well, the latest data, Gerald, that has come out from Kasten and from some of these other people, like the guy that wrote the Omniverse. I mean, they say that it's a Pleiadian Syrian group, and they're Anunnaki. They're all interconnected. They're all 6th or 7th dimensional beings.
Exactly. So that being said, there's factions of them here. They have used humans in their wars for occupying regions and getting resources from day one. It's nothing new. The fact that you're seeing so there's always been proxy wars, and sometimes they've actually shown up in the wars. If you go read the work about Troy in the Odyssey, actually they talk about that. It is trippy. If you've ever read that in detail, the gods themselves, and they even name which ones they are, walk into bodies and take over these avatars and take out some of the enemy that they want, because they want to make sure that one's down. I'm like, oh my gosh, is this for real?
It's all right there. And mythology is such a cipher. It's
the fact that the Anunnaki can use every meat host that they created as an avatar whenever they want, get good with that. And you've never had a private thought. So this is the world to me. Every thought you have, listen, they know about it, and they know. So they know where you are in your path.
Well, do you want to just throw in something there? Because people always ask this question, and you and I talk about this. But how do you add? Where are the archons interrelated?
Well, yeah, I was gonna kind of lay this out. So I believe that they seem to change command authority based on the zodiacal houses they set up in the first place.
Sure.
And you can kind of track which ones were in charge of which house and go, were those good times or bad times? Clearly, the one in the house of Pisces has been really nasty to humans. You can see that right now. Okay, we're changing over to Aquarius. It's supposed to get better. Is it going to be? You don't say. Okay, there seems to be a cleanup process between these warring factions that is a struggle for power. It creates a power vacuum essentially, and all the old infrastructure's got to be possibly taken out of the way before the new infrastructure come in. That could be happening right before your eyes right now.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's going to be devastating, and you're going to go, wow, this is getting worse. Well, maybe it has to get worse before it gets better. I don't know. But that's the model. And what do we have to back that up? Thoth wrote in his Emerald Tablets, and we've had many prophecies, even Christian prophecies about the end times, what the state of the world will look like. Wars, rumors of wars, volcanoes, earthquakes, water turning red, you know, the 7 plagues of Egypt, right? Well, it happened before. Well, if it happened before, it could happen to something to do that's cyclical. And this is where you get into the question about the home planet of the Anunnaki. Does it come around every once in a while and cause these perturbations like they say it did? Okay. And this goes back to several documents, have nothing to do with Zechariah Sitchin. This goes way back, even into the documents in 1870, where it's talking about and mentions the exact word Nibiru. It's in the book, okay? Even though some of those documents didn't make it onto Etzel, so you could digitally look it up. And if you don't know exactly what you're looking up on that, you won't find it, okay? So people have played on that and go, oh, it's not in there, it's a lie. Well, that's not true. Okay. So when the council changes, if we're going from one of the clans to another clan, we have this hope that maybe we're going to live in a golden age, okay? We're kind of holding out that hope now that is happening. But the reality is this is a prison planet, and always has been, for incarnating avatars that are having a material experience here under the control of one of those clans, and that's by Enlil himself, the Demiurgus. This is his prison planet, and that's never changed. He was known as Enlil, Yahweh, El Shaddai, Jehovah, and Zeus, and many other names. Angra Mainyu in Persia, same one. Okay, and his clan and his offspring play some of those roles as well.
Right.
Okay? And I'm talking about Iskar-Adad, who was Teshub in the Hittite culture in Turkey.
Right.
Okay, and several others. Nanar-Sin, who was his son. Allah, the moon god. Okay, that's his son. So to see Allah's people in Palestine fighting with Yahweh's people in Israel, this is absurd. Father and son's cultures warring against each other. Wonder whose idea that was.
No doubt. Mm-hmm. So loop them into the quote unquote power structure of the world now. Like, people talk about the Illuminati. People talk about where are those two in there?
Well, there's an entire pyramid structure that starts, as far as I'm concerned, it starts where the beast and the false prophet from Revelations land, if you want to go that route. And we know who this is. This is Zeus and Apollo. Okay, this is Enlil and Ninurta. Okay, these are the two that are at the head of the chain, and Ninurta was his firstborn son who was in line to rule. Okay, And Enlil, being such a high-ranking being and having been the commander on the Earth for so long, they're the ones that have been in power, running the Demiurgus system. And now that a new system is poised to be released in the Age of Aquarius, which I believe is under Enki's clan.
Sure.
And those two clans are diametrically opposed to each other, so it's not going to go happy. And the only thing we don't know, and we'll talk about who they are, because when you start naming organizations, you kind of get some crosshairs on you. Like we're not on the top of the list already, Jay. Okay? but there have been secret societies and people aligned with the Dark Brothers that started way back in Atlantis, where they've been running proxy wars, whatever they had to do to maintain control on this prison planet. Okay? And you know who they are. We call them the Sons of Belial, in line with the Dark Brothers. And it's clear that part of this dark light role playing that they're playing is a role. It's like actors on a stage.
Right.
Is Enlil really a evil being? Probably not. But his role is to play dark, and his brother's role is play light, and they lay out the stages for us on the planet. And listen, it's very real. It looks very real, right?
Just like Spielberg and Lucas pointed out.
Exactly. So that being said, are the people that are going to die that get caught up into their proxy wars, is that not real? You dang right that's real. Okay? But this is what I call the culling of essentially taking accountability of, okay, who followed this path of dark under the Enlilite clan and was duped and never given access to the guarded tree of knowledge, which the other clan guards, right? They're in cahoots that way. This one has control over the tablets of destiny, the tree of life, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And this one keeps all the riffraff in conjunction with them. If you're not ready or you're unwilling, as a matter of fact, the light may turn you over to him just to be destroyed. And that looks like it happens cyclically over and over in conjunction with Enki and Enlil. So if you're not meeting the standards that Enki set out in your society, like Atlantis, and you become base and greedy and blah, blah, he's like, have at them, bro. They're yours. And actually, that's how the Critias, or the records from Plato end, was Zeus coming in to judge and destroy what had risen in Atlantis. That coupled with him going to see the cycle masters to bring a flood and wipe out the whole earth, to close the portal that they had opened. So that's in the records too. So let's get back on track. There are, how I divide the forces between Enki and Enlil, I would say the Old Dominion forces have been running the prison planet, and all the methods that they've used to keep people dumbed down and doing their bidding under free will, like they're free, but they're really slaves. That I call the Old Domain. And that's what Gerald uses in the Alien Roswell interview to describe that system, and even calls out the Demiurgus, just like Manly P. Hall does, okay?
Sure.
So that's consistent. But that system of control trapped several of the other clan members way back in time. And that clan member under Enki, they're called the Domain forces. Okay, so the Dominion, there's the Old Dominion and the Domain. So they both sound like a D. It's confusing. So Enki was aligned with the light forces that are called the Domain forces. That Errol actually describes in detail.
Sure.
Even going back in history and going, oh yeah, Ahura Mazda was the head of the Domain forces trying to recover lost beings that were here to try to help the enslaved. They got enslaved themselves, and that's what they were here to do. So part of the Anunnaki mission is not completely clear to us how these two factions were working. Okay?
Amazing.
It's complicated. It's complicated. So anyway, that I think that's been going on since the time of Persia, which was what, 600 AD. Right after that, of course, the Nanar Sin army came in, right? The Muslim army came in and wiped out Zoroastrianism. So all remnants of Enki and his son Ninshida in Persia got wiped. Makes you wonder why Iran is such a target right now, though, doesn't it?
Right.
Yeah. Anyway.
Burning the library.
So all the bankers, that are aligned under the Federal Reserve, which goes right back to the Vatican. Listen, the Jesuit order set up the Federal Reserve. This is a Vatican banking system that's running the world.
Right.
No question about it for anybody who's looked into this. So the fact that the Vatican is running the money, they're also running the police and the bureaucrats and everyone else, okay? They are the focal point of the Old Dominion way of controlling the slaves through economics, okay? And they're trying to maintain that in any way they can, including killing people, destroying presidents, ruining families' lives, shutting up people that tell the truth, like me, like you, okay? So you thought the Mossad was bad, and the Jesuit, the Jewish commitments to preserving their faith at the expense of all else, the Goyim, right? The Jesuits are worse, and they always have been. So when you read about the Jesuits and the oath they take, willing to destroy anyone according to their mission, they are the source of evil. They
pretty much wiped out every single being that was in the United States back, 500, 400 years ago.
That's right. That's right. So the fact that they are affiliated with the creation and lending of money in the United States, the laws, look at all the legalistic ways that families have been cordoned off, brutalized, exposed to things in the education system they have no business ever seeing.
The children aren't even owned by the parents, they're owned by the state.
This is the thing. Until you tether yourself from being an asset of that system, of a corporation, that you're an asset that's now worth $800,000 in debt. Right. If you do the 20 trillion divided by 300 million US Americans, okay, you're worth about $800,000 in debt to them, and they're gonna milk you for it any way they can, even if it means taking your kids away.
It's
through CPS, letting bureaucrats abuse them until they abuse them to the point where they're just not human anymore, and then killing them once they've tortured them, and letting the adrenaline from their blood feed an alien race they made a contract with to run this world. That's what's going on. It's disgusting.
That was so good, man. We're going to see right now straight into Odyssey Kai and why it's so important.
Yeah, I can't even go to that place. So why are we telling this story about Odyssey Kai? Back when I wrote Anunnaki and Humanity in 2013, I got approached by people that wanted to make a movie out of it because they liked my story. Would I tell the story a little differently now than what I told in the book? You betcha. Okay, I've had a lot of time to grow up and research a lot more since then. So, but in 2013, I did write a 3-part. Excuse me, just a second.
No problem.
While I was getting some strange synchronicities from September 1st to September 12th in 2013, leading to a gold mining outing with a bro up in the mountains of the Sierra Nevadas. I sat down and I just felt channeled to write down this story that was so important, but I only touched on in my book in a way that Sitchin hadn't done. I came at it differently than Sitchin, and I did that on purpose. But I wrote a 3-part series that was about 29 pages long in my outline. It was like crazy. Okay, a long outline and a lot of detail. And I partitioned this thing in 3 parts, and never really thought that I was going to do anything with it. But I just captured it. I just captured it. And it sat for a long time, And that's when I had this experience where Neil Freer called me out and said, "Hey, I've written a script, check this out." And I got to see what a real script looked like.
Right.
And one thing led to another. And my last attempt, after doing a couple of attempts on the screenplay, and the idea of rewriting a screenplay multiple times, as an author, you got to get good with that right up front. And let it get cold, then rewrite it. Let it get cold, then rewrite it. Because it needs that. It needs that. And you're very sensitive about it when you first write it, because it's like this little gem that you don't want changed, but it might need to be changed. Okay, so I was, so I had my arms wrapped around it for a long time. And last year, it took on its latest form, and by September, I thought it had been. I actually had a version called Anunnaki Genesis,
right,
that followed my outline essentially, the first one I did in 2013. And with some coaching, I was told that you need to change the names to protect the innocent and all that kind of thing. And I was very reluctant to do that.
Some coaching, for lack of a better word.
Yeah. You know how coachable I am, Jay, right?
I'm about to fall out of my chair. That's awesome.
Yeah. So anyway, but I took this to heart, and I really was working toward the thought that if I put this out, I was going to get a meeting I was going to be in front of these people, pitch this movie, and take it to the next level. I just didn't know how to take the screenplay to the next level. You know, I could take the screenplay right now and go publish it on CreateSpace and let it be available to everybody.
Yep.
I could do that, but
Sure.
I know it's going to evolve as I implement it. Because
Absolutely.
every scene that I've tried to implement is evolved and got
Well,
better.
let me just say something really quick for the audience. So this movie is, in my opinion, and it's really shared by many people that are close to me and Gerald that are actually in the know and not, you know, walking around grazing like a sheep, is probably the most important story in the history of mankind. Now, I'm not exaggerating when I say that, because this is actually the story of who we are as a species.
Exactly. And it's only from the Anunnaki standpoint. That doesn't mean there's not a whole bunch of other layers that I'm learning about, okay? But I focused on them because they're the ones that gave us the DNA mark that we had. Were there people before that did it? Or aliens that did it before that? Probably. But I have a record of these ones did it, so I followed that one, okay?
Right.
So this is a segment of our story. It's only a segment. And it goes back about 450,000 years.
But I think, Gerald, let me stop you. I think it is the most important story, though, because the truth is we have no record of before this. And the slave system in the matrix that you and I live in, this holographic reality, this holographic society, this prison planet, is created by them. So all we have to go by is that, right?
Right. Well, we have a couple of the documents to show how they fit in with the bigger picture of the hologram that came from the Creator Vault. And I encourage anybody to read my 7th Planet. Don't just read chapter 5, which is the Emerald Tablets. I did that as a favor to bring it all together for people. There's a whole rest of the book there besides the Emerald Tablets, okay, to piece all this together for you. And it's a lot. It's almost 600 pages, I know.
Yeah. It's an amazing book, by the way. I've read that book cover to cover and actually read it probably 2 or 3 times through and through. It's an amazing book.
I know. You're a reading machine, Jay. I don't think I've ever actually met somebody that reads as much as Jay does. I don't know how good. I might have to test you one day on your retention, but you freaking can put a book away. I'm telling you what.
Just give me about an hour and I'll just go through it in 10 seconds and look at the
I know you will. So, and I appreciate that about you because I'm a reader too, and I go in stages. When I needed to know something, I would pack it in there until I had it. Okay, so right now I'm actually writing more than taking in, but I go back and forth. I go back and forth. So with this movie, I was really stuck. As like I said, I could take it right now and go publish it and make it available for anybody to read. And John Gress did that, by the way. And he's been in this game for a long time. I want to call out to John Gress. I know what he's been up against to try to tell this story. And he has his version of the screenplay and the story, and I have mine. They may not be that coincident, but that doesn't mean they're mutually exclusive. Okay.
Right.
And there may be a place where we can play together. I don't know. Sure. And I want him to know I'm open to that. Okay.
Right.
So, but that said, I decided that in order to get this right, I wanted to approach it so that I could take it to the next level and reach an audience. And I didn't really get really serious about analyzing what the ways that I could do that were until my birthday this last year. Here it was, we'd written it, it was sitting there since September, it was done. Well, in its draft form, okay. And you saw it in draft form, and tried to give us comments, and we were like, no, we can't take anything in right now. That hurts. Really?
It wasn't me, it was my
I know.
But
but there's a window where it's like that, where you can't even process any input. So like it's cold enough where you can even go back and look at it.
Right.
And we were still in that window.
Sure.
Anyway, so I dusted it off, and I was like, okay, how am I going to do this? And I've been looking around, and what synchronicity started happening relative to CGI and complex modern ways of telling a story. Because we were just looking at Guardians of the Galaxy. Kristen just showed me the trailer today. It's in the movies right now. It's
Came out yesterday.
They're mixing avatars and digital stuff, and even since the movie Avatar. So the idea of how can you tell a modern day story, and how much it doesn't have to be me paying an actor $200 million that I don't have. Okay, how much? What can we do to prototype this thing? And so I started looking into that, and bought some tools. As of January, I thought some of the 3D animation tools that were out there were starting to look pretty realistic, even though my gosh, they don't have to look that realistic. Look at Shrek and the Toy Story and all these other things that got really big and told a story. So I'm like, okay, well, I'll dabble a little bit. And so I learned the tools and started putting some of the scenes together. And I actually wore myself out by the time I got to Act 1, Scene 9, doing this advanced storyboarding, doing all the voices and the selecting the scene sets, trying to upgrade my computer so it could render this crazy stuff that's intense, okay?
Right.
I mean, my computer could not handle any of it when I first started. So I went through that. And, you know, as a pragmatic engineer, I wanted to know what the issues were. What am I up against if I want to tell this story? And I decided to mix maybe 80% CGI and have some actors like they did with Doctor Strange.
Sure.
Like that. And so I got to that place, and about this month, I finally decided, okay, I could keep storyboarding this whole thing and go all the way through all 3 acts. It's a 2-hour movie, 120 pages with 33 or 35 scenes to implement for the whole thing. And it probably would get better as I got toward the end than what it was in the beginning, because I'm just learning. So I thought, you know, I better stop now and see if I can find some professional input and maybe form a team and look at what I've done, and can I produce a trailer from this and go forward? Because that's really what you need is at the stage. You got to be able to sell what you're doing to somebody in a short segment that's really grabby, that's pretty hard to do. And these trailers cost a lot of money if you look at all the effort that has to go into that, a 3-minute segment. It's full on, okay? So,
sure.
So I'm looking at that right now to do that. So I've formed a small team, formed a GoFundMe campaign to at least raise some funds so I can contract out while I'm building this up, prototyping it, getting it to the point where I connect with maybe an executive at Marvel Studios, okay,
right.
which would be my dream.
Right.
To bring this thing to a TV series, a movie. I've already done 30 episodes.
Right, both.
And the last thing that came up, which it came up multiple times, that I'm not really a video game person, even though I've been in simulators and I've played in the video game. I don't have any gaming software, even though my kids had every bit of that. All right, every game, every Xbox, Nintendo, Game Boy, they had them all. Okay, so I saw them, but I didn't really play them. But people have brought up the idea of, can you tell this story episodically in a game, because you would reach a completely different.
Of course
place.
You can.
And not knowing anything about the game engines and such, I didn't really look into it until just recently. Somebody goes, "Oh, you got to look into Unreal Engine. They're giving away this gaming engine, so you can produce a game. Doesn't cost you anything, and you just pay a little fee at the end once you release your product."
Right.
I was completely unaware of that existence, and just recently I did download Unreal Engine, and I've seriously taken this as something where I can take my characters from what I've done in iClone and all that, and possibly bring them into this gaming environment and do that. So it's a different effort than what I'm doing with the TV series and the movie, but it could be. But I do see that it can be done. It can be done very quickly as well with the right people.
Will be done.
So I'm actually going through the tutorials right now on Unreal Engine. I'll be done with the first set where I can produce my first game, a little shooter bang up game, you know, that kind of thing. Very, very short order, but conceptually I'll have it down how I can move models in and out of the thing. And it has a very good rendering engine that rivals what I have in iClone. But it is a beast. It's like a 5 gigabyte, big old, massive, all-in-one program, and it's complicated. So it's going to take time. But there are professional people out there that if I can get on the track right now, I'd like to do a parallel path and rewrite a portion of the episodic script to do it as a game. And I think that would be fantastic. So
epic. Well, we're right at 1 hour and 10 minutes. This has been absolutely fantastic. You want to have some final thoughts? Let me just say, so when people watch this, you know, one of the goals of this podcast, you know, besides, you know, letting people understand, you know, where Gerald and I's line of thinking about the world is today, and also obviously, you know, Gerald exposing himself in a more mainstream capacity format, you know, because that's what my audience is. And by the way, we're not conspiracy theorists, just so you guys understand. This is based on the truth. You just have to educate yourself. So I'll just leave it at that. But, you know, we really, if there's somebody that watches this that's connected and you have access to funds, you know people inside the entertainment industry. Obviously, Gerald already put forth that Marvel would be the main goal. You know, these are the guys that are really truly at the highest level today that are putting forward these kind of movies and films. Please reach out to Gerald or myself. I'll make, obviously, connecting with Gerald in this podcast very easy on YouTube when this runs. But please don't hesitate. If you know anybody or could push this forward and get this to where it needs to, you know, generate the audience necessary and generate the momentum necessary, please do not be shy. Reach out to us, okay?
Yeah, I just want to say thanks, Jay. I actually have been spending significant time with this small team of people, somebody out of the UK, I won't name any names just yet, a couple of really professional animators that have years of experience under their belt.
Awesome.
I've been working with those people. They've seen the script. We're working on getting down to a trailer script right now that's going to be on par with what you'd expect to see in, you know, a mainstream venue. And with the right funding right now, we have the talent wanting to be part of this. Okay.
Awesome.
And I can write statements of work and hire people like that because people want to get to work, but it really all comes down to resources.
Sure.
You know, and you know, the reality is I'm positive about a GoFundMe campaign. This is the first one I've run. Of course, right out of the gate, all the people that are your fans support you, and then it reaches the plateau, and you're like, "Oh my God, what is this?" Okay, am I gonna get egg all over my face? I don't know. Listen, I've been in startup companies where we raised $70-80 million, okay,
right,
to implement our ideas over periods of time. So to be with a small team and asking for a pittance of $50,000 to prototype a trailer.
Right.
It makes me feel about this big, really. I don't want to play at that level. I want to play big.
Right.
And I got people out there that have big money. And if they only would step up to the plate and sponsor this effort, we'll play big.
Right.
We'll play as big as you'll support me. I guarantee you, because the talent is there and they want to do this. It's like structural integration. It gets marginalized, insurance not accepted, people have to pay cash for it, so they end up working out of their house, and you never see it in strip mall where the rest of the mass goes, okay, to get a massage or whatever it is.
Well, Gerald, I believe if you continue to manifest it, it will happen. We all know this movie is going to get made. It's got to be made by you. You're the guy to do it. You know, obviously the periphery and the ecosystem that comes along with it, the video game, the television series, it'll happen. You just got to keep manifesting it and keep putting forward what you're doing, you know, sharing, obviously collectively, putting it to the cloud, you know, having as many podcasts, going on, you know, different shows with people who have audiences. Somebody will eventually reach out. It's all going to be attitude. I know it's slow right now.
Yeah.
But it'll happen.
At the risk of getting embarrassed, which I don't really do very well. I don't get embarrassed much anymore.
Right.
I put almost everything that was an outtake, that wasn't something I planned on keeping for the movie, in an Odyssey Key playlist.
Nice.
Okay. And if anybody's paying attention, they'll see that, yeah, okay. It's not, you know, it's not Marvel Studios level yet.
Sure.
But in very short order, in 4 months' time, I was able to do and change the level of work that I was producing, that I started getting people's attention. And to me, that was shocking. It was like, wow, okay. Yeah, yep. I worked really hard. I produced over 70 gig of video since January.
Yeah, and Gerald,
messing around, okay?
Yeah, but they're going to come. I mean, there's no question. Well, let's wrap this up, and then we'll go live on Facebook. But any final thoughts you want to say before we end the show?
Well, I kind of felt like we didn't really end the state of the world real happy and left people a little dangling there. There's going to be creation and destruction happening simultaneously.
Always.
In the worst case, the forces that were part of the New World Order, that they're trying to continue the economic enslavement for us all.
The transhumanists.
With extreme beatdown and control of the one world order. Okay, this is an old world concept, not a new one. Okay.
Right.
I see that they are being challenged. My only question is, how much damage are they going to be allowed to do before they're out of power?
Right.
I don't know what that is. Listen, they've got nukes all over the planet. There's enough weaponry on this planet to destroy this planet many times over. And if they have their way and they're not allowed to be in power, and they want to exercise a thrash and burn policy that can't be stopped, this may be a Matrix reload.
Right.
Okay. And if that happens, guess what? We're infinite.
Get your soul
Our
right.
energy is eternal.
Right.
This meat host is only a transient thing. Okay. Guess what? You're going to be back for the next level of the conscious evolution or war, a battle between light and dark that's ageless and timeless. Okay. It's part of us growing up as spiritual beings, is to be in that conflict. And we're heavy in it right now. That's for sure.
There's no doubt about it, man. Well, listen, man.
So let's close off the New World Order thing and the changes with do your spiritual path now. Do you, because the farthest you can get you is going to influence more people around you. And I'm apt to want to pick up a weapon and form an army and go after and fight like that too. Listen, I'm a soldier at heart. I'm a warrior at heart, just like Jay. But that may not be the most intelligent path. So we might need to go back to Sun Tzu's Art of War and watch the Mitsubishi or the Maserati commercial from the Super Bowl one more time, where the small child comes out. Let's keep our heads down, and there'll be a time when it's time to do the right thing. And we're almost there. I can feel it. So with that said, there's probably lots of questions from the group, and I'll do a few. I'm starting to get a little hoarse. So maybe let's do like 5 good ones or so.
Yeah, no problem. I'll just put you on live now. So I'll stop the recording. That was awesome. Thank you. And then we'll go live on Facebook real quick.